In this video, we are going to refactor our create new transaction method to simply create a new transaction without pushing it into our pending transactions array. We are also going to create a new transaction that has the sole purpose of taking in a new transaction and pushing it into our pending transactions array. So basically what we're doing is we're just splitting up this method into two separate methods. So let's start with our create new transaction method. So this method is taking in an amount, a sender, and a recipient. We are creating a new transaction. And now all that we want to do is we want to return that new transaction, just like that. And one other thing that we're going to want to do is we want to put an ID on every transaction. We want to put a transaction ID on each one. So we will say transaction ID. And to create this ID, we simply want a unique string, very similar to what we have for our node address. Actually, we're going to use the same exact line of code to create a unique transaction ID for every transaction that we make. So in order to do this, we are going to use our UUID library. So let's copy this line of code and we'll put it at the top of our blockchain.js file. Now let's simply use this library to create a unique ID for each transaction. So here in our new transaction, we will simply say UUID invoked, and we want to take out the dashes that are present inside of the unique string that this method creates. So we will say .split on every dash and then rejoin it with an empty string passed in. Cool. So that will give us a unique transaction ID on every new transaction that we create. And that's all we're going to do for our create new transaction method. Next, we're going to create another method. So we are going to say blockchain.prototype, and we are going to call this method add transaction to pending transactions. So we'll say add transaction to pending transactions equals a function that takes in a transaction object. Cool. So basically all we're doing in this method is we are taking the functionality that we just deleted from our create new transaction method and just putting it in its own method. So just like the name of this method states, we are going to take in a transaction object and add it to the pending transactions of our blockchain. So we'll simply say this.pendingtransactions.push in the transaction object. Just like that. And we simply want to return the index of the block that this transaction will be added to, just like we had up here originally. So we will say return this.getLastBlock at the index position +1. Cool. And that's all we have to do to refactor these methods. So basically what we have now is we have our create new transaction method that takes in some data and creates a new transaction and simply returns that new transaction to us. Simple as that. Now we also have a new method called add transaction to pending transactions. This method takes in a transaction object that has already been created and it adds that transaction to our pending transactions on this node. Then we simply return the index of the block that this transaction will be added to. Simple as that. In the next video, we will begin building out a transaction/broadcast endpoint. I'll see you there.